Python.
Hello, everyone. This is Data Driven Chat, and today I am very happy to have Chanuki Seresinhe, who is basically an amazing data scientist. So she is a visiting researcher at the Alan Turing Institute. She is currently lead data scientist at Popsa, and she used to be a senior data scientist at Channel 4. She's got a lot of cool publications that a lot of people are envious about. And, she always works on some cool stuff. And another thing is she produces like an enormous amount of papers every year. So I think it's amazing. And she's always in the news. So hello, Chanuki. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I don't know if I can always come out. I'm going to be able to keep up with that paper production now that I'm mainly working commercially. But yeah, it has been great to get the research out there.
So just to kick off our discussion, can you tell us how did you become interested in data science? And can you tell us a little bit about your personal journey, especially, considering that there are very few women in data science, and it's great to have you with us today and kind of find out about how you became interested in data science and about your personal journey.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, I came across data science a little bit by accident, actually. So I had a completely different career before, and I was running a digital design consultancy, mainly working with design and arts clients. And then it just got to a point where I just wanted to do something different with my career. So I really loved the web. I really loved like the whole online world. But my work itself was starting to become more formulaic. It wasn't as intellectual anymore. It's just kind of just a natural evolvement of what happened with the web. And I was just like, I need to do something else that's a bit more intellectually stimulating again. What should I do? So I went back to university and I was actually studying behavioral economics. And I just like really loved doing that because I've always been interested in understanding human behavior. And then, so during that master's, I actually saw this like ad where people were basically Susie and Tobias Price from the Data Science Lab were looking for kind of researchers to do a PhD, so using online data to understand human behavior. And I thought, wow, that's like a perfect fit because I do understand the online world. I'm really interested in the whole behavioral side of things, I'm gonna apply for this, but I hadn't done like proper data science. So the first thing they told me is like, well, we need to know that you can code, and we need to we can't just take you on this because you're like really excited about this. So can you just like do a little bit of coding? Learn a little basic Python just to like just show us that you can do understand how to do coding in the data science sense. Like nothing big, but just to they kind of had to just make sure. And but luckily, there's all these like really amazing resources online to learn Python. I had already done R in my behavioral economics as well. But I'll talk about why I think Python is a lot more important to learn for data science. So I was able to pick it up, and I was able to, write, just a little script to kind of just grab some data. I think it was from Twitter, and just do a little basic analysis. And then, that's kind of was part of one of the reasons why we were like, okay, let's go with this. So it was just kind of just stumble on it by accident and then realize how much I actually really love it.
Yeah, so that's an amazing journey. So you basically came to academia, and you did a PhD kind of after you have done some work in industry, right? So that's quite unusual. I have kind of the same experience. I also was doing a career in private sector, and then all of a sudden decided to do a PhD in economics. So it's great to hear that these things happen. So you can actually, go from private sector to do a PhD or to do masters. So that's awesome that happens. Can you give us an example of a recent project? And can you tell us what lessons you learned from it? So I know that you work on a wide variety of amazing projects, from mobility to happiness to image recognition. So you have done, I think, you have done it all. Like in principle, you cannot find a project in machine learning that you probably haven't tried. So can you tell us something about maybe a recent project that is in the public domain that you could share with us?
So I won't talk about necessarily, I'll talk about some of my projects later, but I guess I just want to just talk about something I just generally come across again and again and again, and what I've actually learned. Because like I said, I've worked across so many different projects. And I think the one thing that's like, what I've noticed a lot of the times is like when we're working with data, is that we have to be really careful that we don't take that data for granted. So a lot of the times we work on data sets have been collected by somebody else. And it's sometimes, we didn't even get a chance to talk to that person before they have actually done the data collection. Sometimes it might be another team kind of for practical purposes, like especially in commercial settings, like they have to collect the data. And so so when you're actually doing your data science, you end up getting like a subset of the data for your analysis. So just like, just focusing more on the lessons learned, I think I've noticed again and again that mistakes can happen for various reasons. So there might be a way that the data is flawed and we don't actually really understand why the data is flawed. So I've noticed that sometimes you do analysis and the results don't make sense. And you're just like, why? I'm trying to, it doesn't make sense why. And I think it's just really important that that you just to really kind of go back to the people that collect the data, really understand the collection process. Grill them because there's like a small thing can accidentally introduce a bias into your data set that they just didn't think about, because it's, like data scientists, we work with data all the time. So we've got the training, and it actually is a skill we have to develop over time to be very careful that way you don't accidentally introduce a bias to the data set. If it's not a data scientist that has collected that data, they might have just done something very innocent that might have introduced a bias. So that's really important. And just other things like column values. I mean, I worked a lot with, data collected on the public. So I won't name any organizations.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
But, it's just like sometimes the descriptions of the data don't always make sense. And I think it's also really important that you understand what, just even looking at column names and just really understand that the description of that data does actually match what it says. So I think before anybody does any kind of data science project, you need to do a full exploration of that data, be really confident that you definitely know that that data is giving you what you think is getting you. So then your results actually, I think, make a lot of sense. So I didn't want to point to any projects. I didn't want to name any. But I just generally have come across, and it's just, I think it's just really important for data scientists to just before you get, so exciting to do the modeling bit. But before you do the modeling, make sure that data says what it does.
Yeah, I think that's a very important lesson here from you, Chanuki, that you really need to understand the data, because I can tell you a recent example when we just worked on a project for a big organization, and we had a gender variable which was binary 0 or 1, and no one in the data science department could tell us which one was which. So we literally had to go to kind of consumer department and actually ask people to kind of, look at the anonymized, that actual record of the customer, of one of the customers or a couple of the customers, to actually double check that which one was male, which one was female. And so it's good actually, when you have people who can tell you things, right? It is extremely important to double check what you've got and make sure that you understand how the data set was collected, right? What were the parameters that were used, and so it's extremely important. So obviously, you work, like I said, on a wide variety of projects. Below the video, I will give some examples of papers that you have worked on and maybe some news items. If people don't know your work, you definitely should read Chanuki's work. It's amazing. So I'm a big fan, as you can tell. But if you had to pick one thing that you have achieved during your career that you're really proud of, what would that be? You can just pick one. That's the restriction.
Okay. I'll pick one, which is it is a big one, but I mean, it is really my research project that I did on my PhD. And this is why I continue doing my research. So I still continue to be a visiting researcher at Alan Turing Institute because I just thought it was so important that I didn't want to stop it when my PhD ended. And so it was really about the findings of my research. So it's basically, for those of you that don't know my research, just this intuitively, I mean, especially now when we kind of want to lift our moods, I'm just so grateful, at least in the UK, we can actually go for a walk and just kind of go to a beautiful place and just, help lift our well-being. And, but, until recently, there hasn't been any quantitative evidence supporting that. So there has been small scale evidence, but nothing large scale, purely for logistics reasons. Because you can imagine, in the past, if you want to ask people to measure the beauty of a country, I mean, you'd have to ask a lot of people around the entire country, about to rate the beauty of the neighborhoods. And that's quite a really costly exercise and a timely one. So it was only through the fact that we now have ways of collecting data that's different. So, for example, crowdsourcing data. So I had this, website called Scenic or Not, and you rate these images between 1 and 10. What's happening in the background of this website is there's an image representing all of, every kilometer of Great Britain. So you have a really nice map now of where all the beautiful places are. So I was then able to use this data and then combine it with other sets of well-being data and to kind of understand a little bit more about, is there actually a connection? And, I was able to find that, people do report, they're more happy when they do visit a more beautiful place. So yes, I would just, suggest that we do try and do that a bit more often. I also found that there is a link between people also reporting better health when they live in a beautiful place. I'm not really sure what the mechanism is for that, and that's kind of something I've been trying to look into a little bit more. But I think that's quite interesting as well. So, and then as Ganna was saying before, it's yes, I like to do all sorts of different things in my research. So I also then, of course, taught myself deep learning while I was doing my PhD. I'm oh, this really sounds interesting. I really want to pick up this skill. So I actually also started to dig into the images themselves. So again, as a reminder, the data is coming from Scenic or Not. There are these images that represent every square kilometer of Great Britain. So and these images have actually been rated, about 1.5 million times. So I wanted to extract, the data from the images themselves and tie them in with the ratings. So then, you do a statistical analysis to find out what elements of our environment we find are beautiful. And, so we find that it's not only, beautiful nature that we find beautiful, but it could also be, beautiful, certain characterful buildings. It could be bridge-like structures. And, so it's helping, I think all this data, this deep learning, the ability to crowdsource data is allowing us to kind of understand that completely these insights that we normally can never, we just couldn't have gathered in the past. And so, yeah, so I think it's just important that it was important for me because I just thought I was just really grateful to be able to contribute to something that I think is really important to us. And it's, still in the beginning stages. There's still a lot of questions. And I'm hoping other people will now take this research forward and develop it. But I was just really grateful to have the opportunity to kind of spark that research.
Yeah, so we will obviously provide a link to those people who haven't read the article. I think it's great. So yeah, and you were, I think, in all the news, right, with it, so that it attracted a lot of media attention. So definitely a cool project. I know that you cannot probably share everything that you are working on right now, but if you could tell us maybe one thing that you are currently working on and that makes you really excited, that maybe is in the public domain. So can you give us some an example of a project that you are currently doing and that makes you really excited?
Yeah, absolutely. So I could talk about the work I am doing at Popsa. So I'm also the lead data scientist at Popsa, and at Popsa we use AI to automatically curate people's photo libraries into beautifully designed photo books. And so at the moment, if you use Popsa, you can already make a photo book in 5 minutes. It's actually a very easy process. But a lot of that at the moment is it's a bit of AI, but a lot of heuristic algorithms that are driving it. So the work we're actually really doing is trying to take that to the next level. And, how can we use kind of, data science, including, neural networks and AI to actually make that process even better. So one of the things that we've been working on is, there's already this, there's always going to be a pause, right? If you have to think about what photo book you're going to make, that's already kind of taking time. So can we even remove that barrier as well? And can we automatically suggest a photo book for you to print? So say, it happens to me all the time. I go away on holiday, I come back, I get really busy with work, and I completely forget to do anything to do with those photos. And it's like a far distant memory.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, that's definitely a problem for me because I have a 3-year-old son, and every year, I think once a year, I sit down and try to make a photo book. But it's just and then I think, why don't I just do it every month? Because it would be so much easier to do it once a month than once a year trying to fit it all in. So yeah, that's definitely a problem that many people have, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we're doing basically in the data science team is we're trying to automatically discover these stories. And I think that's a really interesting data science problem because, there's many things that can actually go wrong. And I love that, when you're in that place where there's a lot of challenges to actually get it right. And also we need to try and do it with speed because what we don't want is to basically take all your entire photo library, upload that to the cloud and then spend days analyzing it. I think there's some serious privacy implications to that. So I'm very interested in doing data science as much as possible on people's devices, so it protects your privacy. It comes with challenges though, because speed then is really important. So we've got to actually discover those stories while, that device, that on device. So, and when you're designing things on device, it's a lot more problematic because you don't get hours and hours of time to try to get an algorithm running in the background. There's tons of restrictions on that because obviously it will drain, everybody's phone battery if we're always using all the power. So you have to be really clever about it. So the interesting data science angle is to try to discover the story as fast as possible with as little data as possible. So, for example, we can use, very simple metadata, for example, just like a timestamp. And you could think that if you're, if there is an interesting story there, then you're probably taking a lot of photographs. So that signal in itself, just the increase in frequency of your daily photography is a good enough signal to tell you something interesting is there. So now this is where many things can go wrong, and which is why I like working in that space as well. So you might take might be taking a bunch of photos, not just because you're doing something interesting that's worthy of a photo book, but just something random. So, for example, one of our test users is a teacher. So, when she's actually researching something for her art class, she'll take a bunch of, photos just for her art class. And sometimes it's just screenshots because she's just kind of just doing some, research on her phone, just taking a bunch of screenshots. So we have to be very clever that when we actually find that interesting story, that we also, so we can use kind of neural networks because they can understand a bit more of the context of those photos. And you can also run neural networks on device as well to try to minimize basically accidentally sending you a story that might not be interesting to print. Like, here is a great photo book of a bunch of screenshots that you've just taken. That would be
yeah.
So yeah, I love that problem because it has many challenges. We need to do data science at speed. We need to make sure, we give results to a customer that actually makes sense. Obviously we get to use neural networks and I always love that. So yeah, it's a fun problem to work on.
I'm really glad you're doing that because I swear this, on my iPhone, I have a very, a crazy thing because obviously Apple is trying to do kind of similar things in terms of recognition. And when you go to, for example, persons on my phone, it has about 5 different sort of stages of development of my son, and it thinks that it's a different person. So when you have people, it actually cannot understand that it's the same person growing from, baby to a little boy. so yeah, I think it's a really cool problem and definitely makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad you're doing this. It's awesome. So Chanuki, a lot of people who are people listening to this podcast, they are aspiring data scientists, so they want to get into the field. And you already mentioned a number of methods that you are using, like neural networks. You also mentioned some languages like Python. And I obviously interrogate people on this podcast a lot. Are you a Python person or R person and all that kind of stuff? So as someone who works in data science and, you worked in research and in practice in private sector, can you give people some tips of where to start? So if you wanted to get into the field, where would you start? And, what's the best journey in terms of learning?
So like I said, obviously you have to learn how to code. I mean, there's just a step number one, and it's interesting. So I'm in favor of Python, but it really depends on which field you're working in. So if you're doing mainly commercial data science, then Python is the way to go. But R is very useful for a lot of specialist skills. So it really depends on which kind of data science you're interested in. So if you don't know what you're interested in yet, then stick with Python because it's quite general purpose. If you're looking to do something specialist, then you should make sure that the language is fit for purpose. So for example, when I was doing my PhD, I actually did a lot of stuff with R because I was doing a lot of kind of geospatial analysis. I think maybe the packages in Python have improved now, but at the time, anything really advanced that's like statistically advanced is actually a lot better in R. It eventually does kind of get introduced into Python because somebody might write a package, but there might be like a little bit of a delay. So yes, if you don't know what you want to specialize in, then Python's the language to go. If you do know what you want to specialize in, then look for the language that is generally used in that kind of sector or industry or kind of field, academic field. But I think the most important thing, and the one thing that's kind of really tricky, is that you also need to develop your analytical and problem-solving skills as well. And the one thing I see a lot with a lot of junior data scientists is they focus a lot on learning the code bit and all the technical bits, like, they know how to use Git inside and out. They know how to write like really beautiful code, which is important. But they haven't spent that much time developing their analytical, like their ability to problem solve. And so they have trouble basically understanding how to solve data science problems. And it takes a while to teach them how to do that. And if you can actually already start teaching yourself how to do that, then it's incredibly valuable. So it's about, what does it mean? So if you've got a data science problem, you need to, can you understand what it means to create a hypothesis? How do you test that hypothesis? And how do you iterate, your problem, your solution based on what you've just learned? So a lot of data science is iterative. So it's not like you come up with a hypothesis and you test it and then you're done. It's usually you come up with a hypothesis, then you test it, then you have some results, and you realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe my hypothesis is completely wrong. I've got to think about this in a completely different way. And it's a very interesting iterative process. And if you can start learning to develop that skill, then you're going to be like way more well-placed than any other, junior data scientist out there. And of course, a PhD is the best place to learn that. But, not everybody has 4 years to spend doing a PhD. So I don't necessarily think you need a PhD to do data science, because I think there are plenty of online courses now that can help you develop those skills. And if you can get yourself a mentor, then that's really the best way, because what you can do is you can just practice and you can just talk to people, because a lot of this is just about discussions, and you just practice and you just talk through your mentor and say, I want to solve this. And you kind of just go through that process. And I think that's such a valuable skill that I would suggest any junior data scientist try and pick up as soon as possible.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So that's a perfect, I think you described a perfect combination of learning and kind of learning by doing, right? So when you take courses, but also you have interesting problems to work on, and then you can develop your analytical skills and your coding skills kind of at the same time. And yeah, I completely agree with you that communicating with people is key. So whenever I have a difficult problem, I normally have a list of people, that I know can answer the questions. Or I hope that they can answer the questions. And sometimes they tell, oh, Ganna, this is trivial. Or they tell me, oh, that's actually a very interesting, difficult problem. And so I think it's extremely important to come up with, a list of trusted individuals that can help you. So obviously, we talked about kind of the development of skills and a little bit about projects and then different methodologies. I want to kind of now turn to a little bit to business side. So if we look at the role of data science in business, do you feel that data science actually changed the way we think about business context and business insights maybe? Or do you think that we have yet to see the potential of data science to realize in this space?
Yeah, I think we're yet to see it, but I mean, it is definitely changing business quite a lot. And I think the main way it's changing is because we're starting to realize like the wealth of insights that are actually hiding within the data. So in a business context, say it's a B2C business, so if you are selling, business to consumer, and you're probably collecting quite a lot of data, more than you realize actually on consumers. So let's take the photo book analysis for Popsa. So, if you didn't have a data science team, then you're probably going to be analyzing the kind of more, say, maybe the sales side or the marketing side of the data, right? Because you have those figures kind of ready to hand. But there's probably a bunch of other data that's sitting there about your customers that you just haven't even tapped into. So, for example, it could be, the titles, the photo books people are printing. It gives you an idea of what types of subjects they're interested in. You can even, go so far as even looking at the photos people are printing to even gather even more themes about things that people are interested in. Of course, there's always a problem about privacy and implications and how far you go into understanding your customer insights. Even if you have that data, just need to be carefully thought about. And that's like really important at Popsa. We take customers' privacy really seriously. So, for example, an easy way of doing this is to maybe look more at high-level themes. You don't kind of dig into things that might be just a bit too private. And I don't think anybody minds if we know that you printed like 3 birthday books, last year. So yes, there is an amazing amount of wealth of data there, more than I think most businesses actually realize, because there's so many different insights you can gather using data analysis. So for example, I was just mentioning the image analysis. So basically you can use neural networks to kind of extract insights from the photos. So that's, people maybe wouldn't have realized that was possible without the data science. But then to strike that careful balance of basically not invading your customer's privacy in a way that's unethical. And that's something I think we're still trying to, I think as an industry or just as a whole, like we're just still trying to figure out where those boundaries actually should be.
So obviously you have written a lot of very impactful articles, and you already touched on in today's conversation. You already touched on how you kind of construct a project. Because you can have the best data, but you can have an awful project, right? So I guess what I was gonna ask you as well is, how do you go from a data set to projects? So how does it develop? So what is the main thing? Like you mentioned that it's important to talk to other people, but also normally you have a team from different fields, and at least to me, at first when you meet people, you even speak completely different language because they use one terminology, you use a completely different terminology. So can you tell us a little bit about, what is the key to kind of what are the key things to remember when you want to get from a data set into a successful project? How does that develop?
I guess. Yeah, I mean, it is quite difficult to try to figure out what the best way to do that. And you're also going to be working with a lot of different people. I think, well, in a business context, there's probably like different types of contexts, right? So say in a business context, and it's really important to understand where that data science project sits in with the overall business strategy. Because sometimes you will notice that somebody will come to you with a project idea. If you don't understand what the strategy is, that project idea might not actually help that strategy they have in mind. So it's really important, so to also dig into like, how is it feeding, to the overall company's success? Like what is it that they actually want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Because then if you can break that down, so say, they want to increase, customer retention, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's the goal, then you can kind of just double check that the data science project that people are really interested in actually does meet that goal. Because I think I think the big picture thinking sometimes gets missed out a lot with data science projects. So people get really excited about data science, right? They just go, oh, this is really cool, or I want to play with some neural networks. I want to, just mess around with these like cool models. And they don't really think about the bigger picture always, but that's always important. So it's like, I think you need to have the big picture in mind in order to evaluate if the project you're doing is actually a good project. And it'll also help you then to continue to make sure it's continue to be in check, because of course a data science project can get derailed really easily because, you got a bunch of techies working on stuff they really enjoy. They're going to start exploring something that might have nothing to do with the overall objective of the project. So if you have that kind of, I don't know, maybe like that North Star or something you're aiming for, then you can always, check that project is actually kind of matching up as it evolves.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I kind of wanted to again maybe go a little bit deeper in what you said. So a lot of times, I don't know whether that's the same for you. I guess I just wanted to to check whether you have the same experience. A lot of times, I find obviously, like you said, problem statement is extremely important. Like, what is the problem? Like, what are we trying to do? But also, like a lot of times, I feel that. People want to apply data science where they don't actually need it. So like a lot of my work is trying to figure out, like, are you sure that this is like a data science problem? Because like if we can actually, get to exactly the same solution or exactly the same outcome by not using like sophisticated data science. Maybe we should first try that, because normally, a data science project would normally require a lot more, effort and time and, an entire team of data scientists and all that. So do you have the same experience, or are people maybe that are coming to you are more sane in that sense? So they actually come to you when they definitely need, artificial intelligence or machine learning or, any data science involvement?
I've seen that quite a few times. I mean, not just because, I've worked with lots of different people throughout my career. So, and there are just people that so I see it in some ways where that sometimes, they want to kind of use, kind of data science is like as a magician's tool to solve something.
Yeah.
And so they'll, like it says, so to double check, what are they trying to do? Because yes, data science might not actually be the right tool for that job, and it's not a magician's tool. It's a very specific tool to do a very analytical task. And sometimes what they want to solve cannot actually be solved with data science. So they might, for example, not have the data that is needed to solve the problem. It might not require data at all. It might just be like people getting together trying to figure out what the best thing is to do problem. So yeah, I have seen that sometimes where it isn't kind of, again, it's that getting carried away with, I really want to do some data science, so let's apply data science as if it's a magician's tool for this task and see what comes out. And it isn't always appropriate. So, because data science is not a magician's tool. And it's something that's hard to tell and hard to always communicate that with people, because I think there's a lot of hype also in the media about data science, especially AI. There's so much hype with AI, and that causes people to think it's capable of doing a lot more than it actually.
Yeah, I think also a lot of organizations are kind of, feeling that, we need to jump on that train. Like if we don't do it, we will miss something. So they're trying to do, sometimes they're trying to do data science projects without thinking about, what is it for? Is it going to achieve what they want to do? Right? So yeah, like you said, I think it's a very good point that you made, that, we have yet to see the full potential to realize, and maybe, one of these realizations could be that, companies actually realize, in this case, we do need, AI, and in this case, maybe some, smart automation is enough, and maybe in this case, maybe behavioral intervention is enough, or something like this. That would be actually cool to see in the next few years, I guess. One thing I wanted to ask you, I guess we cannot avoid coronavirus. That's a big topic of this year. That's probably the only topic of this year that dominates all conversations. And I know, again, from your experience working on a wide variety of projects, do you think that data science could help in solving the current crisis? And if you think that it is valuable, can you already see some applications where it could be particularly valuable?
I think this data science could be an incredibly valuable tool to help with the crisis. And I've seen a lot of people working on some interesting projects. So I guess things are still in the early stages. It's hard to tell what's coming out of it. I think the hardest thing at the moment is that the data is it's new and it's evolving. And I think a lot of the challenges is that, again, is what I talked about, the data collection. It's like a minefield of mistakes with how the data collection has happened. And I think sometimes some of the conclusions I'm coming up, I'm quite often wondering, like, is that actually the case? There's a lot of assumptions being made that I'm not 100% sure that's actually accurate. So I think mainly data scientists can help work with people to kind of help them understand what's the data again capable of, answering, and to also understand the limits of the data. Because I think the danger we have right now with COVID, especially, is that governments have been collecting data. A lot of governments are not releasing their full methodology as to how they've actually collected that data. And so, lots of discrepancies. There's a lot of holes. Unanswered questions, a lot of assumptions is data that might not be incorrect, and there's conclusions made on that. And I would like to see, I don't know, maybe governments working a lot closely with data scientists, even outside of government, just to kind of help to develop the data in the first place in a way that's robust. Because I think until we do that, we shouldn't even be applying data science to the data we have. Because I'm not confident with the data that's coming out at the moment. I don't trust it. And I think it's in danger of coming up with the wrong conclusions.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we shouldn't, like, as data scientists, we need to make sure that we don't do any harm. And it's very easy to do harm, right? If we are working with wrong data sets, that's definitely the case. And I think also, I don't know if you have the same feeling. Like, I feel that any project that you do on COVID right now gets outdated so quickly. Like, we've done like very, very, short project on hand washing culture and COVID. And, the data that we used was kind of pre-policy, like up to like 8th of March before, we started to get like this whole idea of physical distancing and other measures in different countries. And, now we have this kind of like a fan club that keeps replicating like our model, because we published all the data like that we used and everything. And people keep replicating with kind of new data on how many corona cases we have. And they say, oh, actually, that's not right anymore. That's not right anymore. And yeah, that's not right anymore. And this is what you need to accept, that, stuff gets outdated because like you are working with initial data set, and then, it can get contaminated by policy, right? Because there is one type of policy in one country completely different in the other country, different culture, different, even like if we take hand washing culture, for example, there are some countries like India, for example, where you don't have access to clean water. So it doesn't matter what World Health Organization says about hand washing. Like if you don't have a water supply, then, you simply cannot do what it prescribes. So it's like all these things really contaminate the data sets. So I think it is an extremely important point that, we need to be careful, and maybe also talk to epidemiologists, right, before we do anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was another thing I was going to mention. Is like, I have seen a lot of people, they do just kind of want to mess around with the data and show off what they know about data science, and they're not collaborating enough with people to actually really understand the problem, because it's such a complex problem. And what we really don't need is another data scientist putting out their opinion on how it can be solved, because it is a complex problem. If people could collaborate more to try to develop the deeper understanding, I think we're going to get a lot out of it. And I think another thing is that, as data scientists, we tend to be kind of techie. So why not actually offer people just techie help? Because I think a lot of people out there, and there's some different groups. I think there's covidtechsupport.com. Maybe we can write these links. And I've just seen that basically there's websites that are just trying to collect people with just technical skills, just to help organizations with different things. Because COVID causes many problems. It's not just the disease itself. There's so many effects it's having in society. There's businesses that are like absolutely struggling to survive right now. So we don't necessarily, as data scientists, just need to help with the disease. I think we can help humanity in many, many different ways. And, maybe it's not always the data science. We don't always have to use that like magician's brush. Maybe we just take our tech skills and, apply that and just to help other people in the community with something else.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, beyond the communities that you mentioned, there was a very cool call by the Royal Society. And I know the Alan Turing Institute had a separate call on COVID, where it's all basically, I think, driven by the colleagues from, medical schools in the UK. So they basically say, no, this is what we need from data scientists right now. And we would really appreciate if you didn't get into this problem, but we really need to solve this problem. Like, for example, how many, masks we need, or can we identify vulnerable groups in the population, those types of things that are really necessary. So we obviously talked about COVID, and I want to kind of now broaden the picture a little bit. So obviously, COVID will probably define some of the things that we do in data science for the next year at least, maybe longer. But if we talk about the future of data science and application to business, what do you think? What do you think is the future? How will it develop in the next 5 years? What are the hot topics for business?
I think the main thing is that business still need to learn how to use data science. I think we're still in the kind of infancy stage. So there are companies in Silicon Valley, and they know what to do with data science, and they're like far ahead. But there's almost everywhere else are completely behind, because a lot of companies don't again, they're trying to use data science a little bit as a magician's wand, so they don't quite understand it. And I think what we need to see is this kind of area maturing in the business sector. So basically, just you shouldn't just get a data science team and not have a plan. I think you have to really understand how data science plays a role in your entire business strategy, because it can touch on every single aspect of your business strategy. I think when you realize that, you're going to get so much more out of your data science team. And there has to be a really good cross collaboration between business and between data scientists. And I think we touched on this earlier, why it's so important for data scientists as well to be good communicators, because you need to communicate with business people that might want to do something, and you have to help bridge that gap between the people that know a lot about the business, and then you're the data scientist and might know how to solve certain problems, so that you can help the business understand that many different ways data science can help. So I think more than even any techniques or any developing or any kind of neural networks or AI, I think we need to just mature the data science and the infrastructure within businesses. We have to learn, what does it mean to have a data science team in a business? What specific roles are actually helpful? What skill sets are really useful? So yeah, I think there's still a lot of just basic things that still need to be learned, still need to develop before we even go through any of these kind of other kind of amazing developments that are happening.
So do you think that we need maybe more kind of digital leadership courses for people at the top of organizations, so that they understand how to better apply different techniques? Or maybe just to understand that the output that the data science team gives you still is based on some assumptions, right? Because I think it's from a perspective of a person that doesn't really it wasn't really exposed to these models, right? When they get the data science output, they really think that, oh, this is really cool, right? And this is really the state of the art, and this is something that I can trust. But it's not always the case, right? Because we always work with some sort of training sets, like you mentioned, the data sets that might be collected in inappropriate ways sometimes, and unless you check it, it's even for a data scientist, it's a difficult task. But for the leadership team, it's probably even more difficult. So do you think that we will have more of this kind of executive education emerging in the next few years? Is that the future?
Yes, I mean, that's a really good idea. We definitely need a lot more of that. I think there's a lot of leadership, because there are some courses, right? They introduce you to the introduction to machine learning or introduction to data. So basically your executive team will go and do that course, and then they'll feel like, okay, now we understand data science inside and out. And actually they don't. So it would be much more interesting if the courses can focus specifically on what it means, how to really know if you do actually understand data science fully. I can't think of my top of my head how to do that course, but I know it's needed, because I think what's happening at the moment is people are taking this like intro to data science course. They feel like they understand data science, and then they start starting to make decisions, and they actually don't understand it. And it's like, there's that kind of curve, right? You think you completely understand a really difficult subject, and then the moment you start understanding all the things you actually don't know, that's the moment you can actually start improving your knowledge. And we need to kind of help a bunch of people kind of like get over that initial confidence fall, realize what you don't know, and then help them actually develop the skills that can help them become a good leader for data science, even if they're not data scientists themselves, just kind of building that leadership ability.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's extremely important. So you also touched on ethics and responsibility, and I know that we could probably talk for hours on this topic. Like from practitioner's perspective, I mean, it's obvious that in your research, you have kind of various checks and balances. We have ethics committees, but I think what we see in the private sector is a lot of A/B testing going on. So how do you basically, to what extent it's important to think about ethics and responsibility when you're designing projects in the private sector? And this is more of a rhetorical question, I guess. But how can one make sure that things are ethical and responsible in practice? So, what I guess from your personal perspective, what like internal barometer do you use to make these decisions, if you can share that?
It's a good question, because yes, I mean, ethics is really important in academia. We get drilled into the importance of ethics. So in an academic setting, it's actually I wouldn't say I can't say it's easy to be ethical, but because it's not easy at all. You have to really like be careful that you're not. You have to be careful you're definitely being ethical. But it's easy as a practitioner to say, okay, I do want to be ethical, because there's a bunch of frameworks, right? I mean, you want to do research on people's behavior. You have to get approval from ethical committee. There's many barriers to stop people from doing things that are unethical. In a business setting, those barriers don't exist. However, they're incredibly important, because because if anything gets out there that you've done something unethical with your customers' data, your business is gone. Forget it. Nobody's going to respect you anymore. And I think people sometimes underestimate the importance of that. So I mean, we've seen so many like news articles and things like we've discovered later that companies have done that are just not right. And then all the problems they have trying to fix those problems, and some for those big companies that costs like huge a lot of money. And probably hurt their business quite a lot. So things that I try to look at is if I'm actually, going to understand something, or if I'm going to extract a certain amount of data, I want to be very clear that there is a customer benefit. And I have to like really carefully balance out like what's privacy implications that I might actually be tiptoeing on, because so this goes beyond the law, because there's not enough laws actually to protect people's privacy in the data area. So some of it's actually up to us as data scientists practitioners to kind of create the boundary that we think we shouldn't cross, because the law is not going to tell us that. So like I said, like with the Popsa photo book thing, of course, if I actually analyze this entire person's photo library, I can know a lot of things about a person. I would never do that, because that's like completely like a total privacy invasion. And I think that's a really obvious example. But I think some people, they just sometimes get a little bit carried away with the insights that we might be able to gather, and without actually thinking through the privacy implications of that. And I just think we just have to think it through. We have to think, is that something I would feel comfortable with if somebody knew all that stuff about me? Am I comfortable with that? And also just think about what the accidental side effects of something might be. Because I don't think we just sit there and we think through, what we're doing. Sometimes, like I said, the bigger picture is really important. And we have to think if there are actually any accidental implications we are introducing by doing something that might be, it might seem ethical, but there might be kind of an accidental effect down the line that's actually unethical.
Yeah,
so it's important.
Yeah, I think it's that's extremely important. Which is, I mean, I'm really glad that you are thinking about this in the private sector, because I think also, apart from what you've mentioned, would you be comfortable with that personally and all this? Sometimes you have unanticipated, consequences. Like the example that I could give is Facebook, right? I mean, it started as a nice little project, and trying to connect people online. But, as we have recently discovered with Cambridge Analytica and political micro-targeting, it could become a threat to democracy, right? And I don't think the folks that were developing the original version of Facebook ever thought that would become an issue like several years down the line. So I think sometimes also, right, you kind of, as a data scientist, you're trying to anticipate, of course, the dependencies and things and risks that you're creating with your tag and with your code. And but sometimes you wouldn't be able to even imagine that that could be used in that way. I guess it's also probably and that's probably what you do as well. It's updating, right, your beliefs about what is. It's a constant dynamic system, right? When you're constantly thinking, okay, well, is this right or wrong? is this becoming a problem? Is that correct? So do you kind of dynamically think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also talk things through with other people too. And I think I think something like Facebook probably happened. I don't know exactly the mechanisms and I don't want to make any accusations, but I could see it easily happening with some data scientists getting carried away with an idea and not thinking about the societal accidental impact. So say you discussed it with a bunch of other people that might have different perspectives. They might say, oh, that's interesting, but what if? And they might see something that you can't see. And I think it's important, if you're actually doing something like big on that kind of scale, that you're actually discussing it. I think now companies have they have now different boards, and they kind of are introducing kind of independent boards to kind of evaluate some of the things you do. But I think as a data scientist, to practice kind of if you are kind of doing something big that might seem okay, to just double check that with some people, perhaps even outside your business, to double check you're not accidentally kind of going to cause something that's actually harmful for society. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think another important point that you made, and I think that's the kind of the point that I want to always get across to my ethics and legal colleagues, that companies actually want to do things responsibly. That's important, because a lot of times when I go to the various conferences in law and ethics, there is an assumption that companies just want to do everything for the kind of business purpose. Yes, they want to do that, of course, but and they want to make profit. That's the whole point. But like you said, no one wants to deliberately hurt the customer, because that hurts your reputation and that could potentially end your business. So I think that's also a very important point to remember, right? So in this case, so yeah, we're almost at the end of the podcast, and this is the question that many people complain about, but I still ask it. The question goes like this: if I asked you to recommend one book and one film, what would your recommendations be? And they don't have to be a data science, book and film. It could be just something that inspires you and kind of made something that made impact on you, and so just something that you like.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick that one book you must read, but I could give an example of one book that I'm actually reading right now. That is actually having an impact on my career, and it's a book called Data Feminism. And they actually also at the moment have a running book club that people can actually dial into. So you can Google Data Feminism and you should be able to find that book club. I think it's really interesting and really relevant to data science today. So data science is obviously a form of power. It can be used for good, like for example, in medicine in terms of treatment, drug discovery and genomics. But it can use, as we talked about, in so many ways that are unethical as well. So I think it's really important to consider who's actually wielding this power. Do they have the society's interest at heart all the time? what biases are we introducing by giving control to the data just to a very few, to just a few elite members of society? Because, like I said, maybe let's just assume that they don't want to cause harm, but perhaps they're causing harm just because they haven't been exposed to the other ways that data, the things they're doing can harm somebody, because they have just, I don't know, maybe have lived more privileged lives, and so they're not going to be thinking about problems that might occur to other parts of society. So, how can we break down these barriers? I don't know. I'm just personally really interested in how can we democratize data science? How can we make it much more accessible to a lot more people? Encourage more
diversity
more
and inclusivity in the field.
Yeah, just like more people from different backgrounds. Just encourage like diversity in teams, and just kind of, because I think we need to really, really, really think that through, because I just think at the moment it's a bit too, the power is centered in a way that's not diverse, and I don't think it's good. It's absolutely not good for society.
Mm-hmm. So how about a film?
Oh God, a film as well.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but yeah, how about a film?
I can't think of a film about. Has to be about data science?
No, it doesn't have to be about data science. Just maybe something that you like, and you would recommend other people to watch.
I can't think of one now off the top of my head. Like focus on the book now. I kind of got carried away with that. I know of a film, but I forgot the name of it.
What is it about? Tell us.
Oh, it's this film that just came out. It's the one. It takes place in Mexico. It's black and white. It was really famous, and they had it on Netflix and everything.
Oh God, yeah. I only remember the artist that is black and white, and also, it's.
Can't believe I just blanked that film title. I'm gonna have to write that in the LinkedIn thing. The reason I like that film is because there's it explores the kind of contrast between the wealthy and the not wealthy. I guess it kind of relates to.
Is that Roma? By any chance?
Roma, yes. Roma.
Oh, okay, Roma. Yeah, I guessed it. Here we go.
And I was thinking Rome. No, that's not. And I kept having Rome coming back in my head. No, the film is not Rome. What is it?
Roma. Roma. This is an awesome film. Yeah, indeed, it was basically sponsored by Netflix. The funding came from Netflix, and I think it got 3 Oscars. Right, 3 Oscars. Awesome film.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film, and it's exploring, this whole theme of power struggles, and just, I think it's not, I don't know, it's not necessarily to do with data science. It's just a beautiful film to watch, and maybe it just makes you think about life in a different way, from a different perspective.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chanuki, for today's conversation, for sharing your, your experience and your ideas and your opinion on data science and your career advice on data science. Thanks a lot for finding the time to talk to me today. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed that chat, and I really hope that people found anything that was useful out of that. And I'm also happy, if you want to ask me any further questions on anything I said, I'd be more than happy to continue the conversation with anyone listening to this podcast.
Thanks a lot. And I'm going to make links to your Twitter and to your other social media at the bottom of this video. So if you guys go at the bottom of the video, you will see all the information about Chanuki, and you will be able to connect with her and maybe ask some questions offline. So, but thanks a lot. Thank you again for doing this.
Great. Thank you.